Thursday's New Orleans Saints training camp practice was the best practice I've ever seen. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, some competitions don't even feel like position battles anymore. I'll tell you how Kellen Moore is winning over his players by doing something that every coach in the NFL should. And we'll kick everything off with what I think was the best practice on airline drive that I certainly have ever seen. And it was capped off by big plays, takeaways, and even a little bit of controversy. We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, whether it's your first time or your next time, being here with us this time, making us your first listen, and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thursday's training camp day 8 practice was the most exhilarating and energetic practice any of us have seen on airline drive for some time. Certainly the most energetic and exhilarating and fun practice I have ever seen for the New Orleans Saints. And it all came down and boiled up to basically one shining moment, and even controversial moment of training camp, where Jake Haener, who was running with the third team today, led a 2-minute drive with 1:40 left on the clock. It was an end of game situation with them trailing, the offense trailing 20-24, meaning that you had to get a touchdown, and Jake Haener went down the field and he got it, but not without a little bit of intrigue. I'm not going to bother you by going kind of play by play and everything like that, because that's super boring, but you can go and check out all of our observations as well as a rep by rep charting of every single thing that happened in training camp over at LouisianaSports.net if you'd like to see that. But I will tell you this. It was a multi-play drive at the end of practice, literally the very end, last thing of practice that had happened. And this was a practice where we saw cornerbacks and wide receivers talking trash to one another, offensive line and defensive line jawing. We saw players from the sidelines chiming in and everything like that. It was a very energetic and fun practice all throughout the day. Everything lighthearted, a lot of trash talk and everything, but a lot of that trash talk came with smiles on the face and everything. Like, everyone was having a good time. I'm not trying to make anybody sound like they were being, ridiculous or anything like that, but just a ton of fun. And it all culminated in that final moment to where you got a pass interference penalty, which was a bogus pass interference penalty, by the way. I'm very comfortable saying that, but hey, who cares? This happens in the NFL sometimes. And so a pass interference penalty in the back of the end zone on a target from Jake Haener to Mason Tipton, who had 2 touchdowns on the day, by the way. Mason Tipton continues to shine, the second-year wide receiver out of Yale, who was a camp star last year but dealt with injury and didn't really get to catch on during the regular season. He's doing it all again here in 2025. But a pass interference penalty called on Rajon Wright that ends up advancing the ball to the 1-yard line. And when that pass interference penalty happened, remember, Kellen Moore has gone out of his way to make sure that officials are at every single practice so far, because the NFL will only give you officials at your practice so often. And so Kellen Moore has gone to the community, welcoming in people who ref college football games and high school football games to make sure that they always have officials at practice. That pass interference penalty gets called. The defense goes crazy and everybody's bickering and, arguing with the refs and stuff like that. And, Kellen Moore effectively is like, hey, these happen in the NFL. We're running a play from the 1-yard line. Everybody be ready. They get up on the 1-yard line, getting ready to run the play. And then gamesmanship by Brandon Staley, who actually called a timeout on the defensive side of the football to both, I assume, ice Jake Haener and the offense, while also giving his defense a chance to get a snapshot look at what it is that the offense wants to do, and then retake the field with that knowledge and be ready to make those adjustments. Jake Haener takes the snap. It's a sprint out to the right side, so the pocket's moving immediately. You see the Saints do this constantly on second, like on 2-point conversions. This is a very popular play. Sprint out to the right. You try to develop a levels concept. You get one player running at the goal line, another player running in the back of the end zone, hoping that one player either brings a defender down so they don't get the depth to cover the player in the back of the end zone, or one player forces a corner or a coverage player to get a little bit too deep because they're worried about the player in the back of the end zone and opens with the player at the goal line. The player in the back of the end zone ends up opening up because one of the coverage players doesn't get enough depth, and it's Mason Tipton who catches his second touchdown on the day. And it ends up being what would be a game winner in a game situation and a practice winner in this situation as well. A very game-like environment. The bickering with the referees, the jawing back and forth, the intensity, the timeout by Brandon Staley. Everything about it. The gamesmanship was there, and this was overall the most exciting practice, the most invigorating practice, and really the most reinvigorated I've seen this team in years. And it was a practice environment. It was a practice environment. And this felt like a game-like situation. And these players absolutely responded to that. The intensity was up. The sense of urgency was up. All of it was there. The offense comes out on top on this one, but it followed two failed 2-minute drives where Spencer Rattler was at least able to get the offense into Hail Mary range. They didn't run the Hail Mary because A, I don't think that they've worked on that yet. And B, you want to eliminate some of the needless collisions that could potentially create. But getting them into a fourth down situation where they could either go for it or go for the Hail Mary. There might not have been enough time left on the clock to actually go for it. There were only 3 seconds left when he spiked it at the 40-yard line. So you get, or 38-yard line rather. And so you get to that point to where you could throw a Hail Mary, but you haven't been ready to work it. But then Tyler Shough gets there and he gets a 3-play 2-minute drive. Not a lot going on for him or around him for that matter. Immediately pressured on the first one, sacked on the second one, and then a sack fumble by Isaiah Foskey, we believe, on the second one. It was kind of the third play was kind of at the very far end of the indoor facility. So it was a tough day for a couple of these guys. Certainly a tough day for Tyler Shough. I'm very interested to see how he responds to that going into the long day upcoming back in pads on Saturday after the day off on Friday. But Jake Haener stole the show. I don't think that he's claimed the number one quarterback spot. I think that's still very firmly in Spencer Rattler's grasp, but a great showing from Jake Haener, who also had probably what was likely the best throw of camp, a throw down the seam to a diving Dante Pettis, only where he could get it in traffic, very tight window throw, an incredible throw, but he might have been sacked before he actually got the ball out in real game situation. And so that's something to consider when it comes to all this. But outside of all that context, just a really, really fun situation, situational drill, a day of situational work and all that. It was awesome. It was super, super fun. And it's things like this that are helping Kellen Moore win over this team. A couple of other things real quick on the quarterbacks. Rattler's day, he was 9 of 12 with a touchdown. Tyler Shough's day, he was 4 of 8 with a touchdown and 2 interceptions. But he got those interceptions because he was playing the most aggressive that we've seen. So I hope he'll keep that aggression and take more of those shots, not be risk averse. And then Jake Haener was 9 of 12 with a touchdown on the day, and that touchdown being the game winner and practice winner. And again, it was that real game situation that is a perfect shining example of how Kellen Moore is winning over his players. Let me tell you exactly how he's doing it as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Do you ever wish that managing your money and taking control of your finances was easier? Well, thanks to the Monarch Money app, it absolutely is. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. My favorite thing about the Monarch Money app is the number of things that you can do. Everything from checking out how much you're spending on things like subscriptions and takeout, to being able to get rid of some of the other apps because of all the different things that you can track, like your accounts, your spending, your investments, all of that available to you over at Monarch Money. It puts everything all in one place, and it makes it super easy to share your finances if you're sharing that responsibility with somebody else as well. So take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, family. I think the thing that Kellen Moore is doing that is allowing him to win over his new team, his players, even his fan base so quickly and so successfully is really, really simple. And it's going to sound super rudimentary when I say it, but I will explain what I mean. I think that Kellen Moore is winning over his players because he lets his players play football. And I know that that sounds super simple, but I ask you to remember a lot of what we've talked about so far that's been so impressive about what it is that this new coaching staff, this new approach that the New Orleans Saints are taking is very common sense focused. And as we've talked about before, common sense isn't always understood, common sense isn't always common. And so when we hear things and see things like what Kellen Moore is doing when it comes to the schedule, right? Giving players up to 1:30 off following practice so that they've got time to do things like recovery, additional film study. They can go and do things like cold plunges and cupping and all the other things that you do to take care of your body, and extra film study with your position group, and taking a shower and grabbing lunch, like all of these things. These are all things that are player first and player centric. And that's not super surprising, right? It's not that long ago that Kellen Moore was an NFL player. And so it's been things like that, but it's also things like what we saw during practice on Thursday, to where Kellen Moore, Brandon Staley, they took this team from Doug Nussmeier. They took this team from doing a lot of scripted things like, okay, going to work this situation. It's red zone, 1st and 10 from the 20. We're going to run this play. Red zone, 2nd and 5 from the 15. We're going to run this play. Red zone, 2nd and 3 from the 13. We're going to run, or 3rd and 3 from the 13. We're going to run this play. And then red zone, like 1st and goal from the 5. We're going to run this play. And it'd be all scripted out and everything like that. Kellen Moore took practice from that point and then just scaffolded its way to what they call it periods, to where literally Kellen Moore is calling plays, Brandon Staley's calling plays. The offense doesn't know what they're going to get before the play call comes in. The defense doesn't know what they're going to get before their play call comes in. And the defense is having to respond to what the offense is doing. The play call's coming in because of how the offensive personnel looks and all these other things. It creates game situations where players can just go out there and play football. We've all been through it in our own way, right? Many of you know that I spent a lot of time before I transitioned over to sports journalism. I was in theater. I did Broadway, off Broadway, national tour. I wasn't a performer, but I was a stage manager, and a lot of my responsibility was making sure that things looked the exact same every day, kind of acting as a director on the fly, but also calling cues, changing the lights, all these other things. And it's easy when you know what to expect, right? It's easy to sit there and work on things and then constantly get them right because you're doing the same thing over and over again. It's different when you have to be back on your heels or you've got to think on your toes. Those are different situations. And so to be put in that situation where, yeah, you can get into the rhythm of doing something and getting better at it through the reps and the repetition. Think about it like learning a song on a piano. Before you start cultivating and creating and composing your own music, you're learning somebody else's song or you're learning scales and you're practicing those things, the rudimentary stuff. There's value in all of that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that stuff is not valuable. But where the fun really happens is when you do get to play jazz a little bit and just jam, play how you're feeling. There's some of that to the NFL side and the game of football as well, right? You don't play chess by playing chess and making the same moves every time. You don't play chess by playing chess and having the person across from you make the same moves every single time. You have to improvise, you have to respond, you have to adjust. And so by putting players in position to simply play football, Kellen Moore has his players feeling like he trusts them, feeling like they are being given a voice and an opportunity to go out there and do what it is that they know how to do. And they're being given agency over what it is that they look to do on a football field. And they're getting that 7 days into practice, 8 days into practice. Because remember, the Saints started doing these 2-minute drills during Tuesday's walkthrough. So day 6 of training camp, right? It was in between their 5th and 6th practices. They had this walkthrough day. And during that walkthrough day, you saw them get Rich Homie Quan stuck in the head again. You got the opportunity to kind of see advancements, right? Take a snap from the 40 on 1st and 10, walk through what that play looks like. Take another snap from midfield at 1st and 10, 10 yards downfield, walk through that. Take another snap on the plus 40. What does that look like? What is that play call? How do you deploy that? Work through that, walk through that, so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, you're doing drills where you're doing some red zone work, right? And you're taking snaps from the 20, from the 15, from the 13, from the 10, from the 3, from the 5, all that. And then at the end of practice, you're running this 2-minute drill. So you're starting where you started when you were doing the advancements, where you're going from the 35 to the 45 to the 45 to the 35, all these other things. And then you're trying to get to the red zone where you just work some of those red zone drills. And so everything scaffolds and everything. Again, I say this about Kellen Moore constantly, and I feel like I'm becoming a broken record. I'm sure you're very annoyed with me when I say it, but what Kellen Moore does makes sense. And it puts players in position to do what it is that they do well. And at the very bare foundation of that, what every one of these players does well is some form of playing football. Period. Full stop. Is it really that simple? Of course not. It's far more complex than that. But is it also kind of that simple? Yeah, it is. Put them in position to do what it is that they do well. Common sense. Put them in position to do things that they do well playing football by asking them to simply play football. I'm sure it sounds so stupid, but really and honestly, it is the thing that's working so incredibly well. I cannot express to you how much excitement and energy there was on that football field on Thursday. My only negative to come from that day is that it happened to happen on a closed practice day when fans couldn't be there, right? And so my hope is that they revisit that something like that happens again, and that you get the chance to experience it as well. And then, of course, in a game to experience it and have it ideally come up with the Jake Haener version of that touchdown drive, or that 2-minute drill that ended in a touchdown as opposed to the others. I'm excited for you to be able to see that. And I hope that you get the opportunity to. But in order to build that excitement, to build that urgency or that sense of urgency, in order to build that intensity, you have to simply let these players play football. And I think that that's something that Kellen Moore and his staff have done, and the players have really taken well to. They're not being told how to play football. They're not being told that somebody else knows better than them. They're being told, hey, you know what to do. Now let's go out there and do it. And that's how Kellen Moore is winning over his team. Coming up next, let's take a look at some of the other position battles outside of quarterback, because some of the battles aren't really feeling like battles anymore. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy, which is now introducing 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. Yeah, it's all the bold flavors of grape, ginger, and lime, all the bold flavors of your favorite golf drink, but without the alcohol, all put into a quick, energizing shot that'll help you turn that strong front nine into a strong back nine as well. I don't get to play golf very often, but when I do, I really, really enjoy it, and I love a transfusion on the course as well. You can head over to 5hourenergy.com today. That's number 5hourenergy.com, and use the promo code LOCKEDONGOLF and receive 20% off of your order. This offer is valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions, and the code is not good for subscription orders. So whether you're meeting up with friends or you're trying to turn the 19 holes into 36, this energizing shot can be all yours and will help you power through. Order transfusion flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's show with a look at the New Orleans Saints' other non-quarterback competitions, and some of which haven't even felt like competition so far at all. Let's start off with the safety battle. This was an interesting position. You had Tyrann Mathieu and Justin Reid. Then Tyrann Mathieu retired. Justin Reid slots into Tyrann Mathieu's role as sort of the quarterback of the defense. And then now you have this open spot next to Justin Reid in the role that we thought Justin Reid was going to have. And so far, it's been Julian Blackmon since he was added to this team. It took a little bit of time, But Julian Blackmon showed up and immediately started making plays, had an interception just a couple days into camp, and then ended up rising up into the first team on Tuesday for the walkthrough, where they started going through some of the 2-minute drill work and all those other bits. And then by Wednesday and Thursday, he was solidly with the first team defense next to Justin Reid. Now, Kellen Moore has said that they will continue to rotate that safety position. We're waiting to see that away from Julian Blackmon. But so far, A, Julian Blackmon has performed there. And B, we just haven't really seen the rotation just yet. It started off with Jordan Howden, then it's gone to Julian Blackmon, and then we'll see if there's any further rotation there. It would make sense if they did rotate after this sort of day off today, because you did the walkthrough of the 2-minute drills, and we often think about 2-minute drills as being an offensive drill, but remember the defense is out there too. And so you had him learning the hurry up, how to prevent sort of those types of situations defense. And then so both days when you're actually implementing that 2-minute defense, that 2-minute offense, then all of a sudden he's been in that first team and he's held there pretty solidly. So yeah, that makes sense. So if you do something different, that gives you an opportunity to rotate Julian Blackmon out, put somebody else in, all that. But as of right now, it feels like this is becoming Julian Blackmon's job. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? When Tyrann Mathieu retired, you lost some really valuable experience in the secondary. So because of that, that maybe makes experience elsewhere a little bit more valuable. Guys like Julian Blackmon, who have 5 years of NFL experience, might become a little bit more valuable than a rookie that could step into that role, or a second or third year player that could step into that role. Same thing could become the conversation at cornerback with Isaac Yiadom over Quincy Riley. At least to start the season, you might want the veteran presence because of the veteran presence that you've lost in Tyrann Mathieu. So with that, that does open up a little bit of a pathway for Julian Blackmon to be able to really contribute from that spot. But I will say, Jordan Howden had an interception on Thursday, looked pretty good throughout training camp so far. He even got to the point where now he's comfortable enough and he's like baiting quarterbacks as well. He said that he kind of baited Tyler Shough into the throw that he intercepted in the end zone there, or at the goal line there. So I think we are seeing some interesting pieces here, but this is starting to not feel like a battle because of how much Julian Blackmon is in there. We'll see if that reignites after the day off today going into Saturday's practice. The kicker competition is no longer a competition. This very much feels like Blake Grupe's job. He's 19 of 20, and that includes makes from 51, actually 2 makes from 51 yards, and something good from 53 on Thursday in the indoor. His one miss was of 49 yards. However, it happened during this weird downpour that happened literally for like 3 minutes of practice. It was the only time it rained that entire day, was while Blake Grupe got into like his 3rd, 4th, and 5th kicks. He made the first 2 and then missed one of them as he went back to the same distance there. But Charlie Smith has this enormous leg, but all of his misses have been between 40 to 50 yards, like within that range. And so there's some inconsistency there in terms of accuracy and all that. And Charlie Smith's got a lot of talent. He's going to continue to be able to develop it here, but it feels like Blake Grupe is going to hold on to this role for another year. And the Saints don't have to be in any kind of hurry with Charlie Smith at all. He's on the International Player Pathway Program. He's got a roster exemption. He doesn't count against their 90 or 53-man rosters. And he's on a 3-year contract. So they would have him going into next year as well. So they get to give him time to develop, get comfortable, build. Remember, this guy hasn't been kicking, American football kind of kicking for a very long time. And so this is an opportunity for him just to continue to develop. One battle that still very much feels like a battle, however, is running back 2. You still don't really have a clear indication of who's going to be the go-to guy behind Alvin Kamara. We've seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire get a lot of run. We've seen Kendre Miller get a lot of run. Devin Neal get a lot of run. Velus Jones Jr. get a lot of run. And he's had some real standout moments. Velus Jones Jr. had maybe more standout moments than any running back outside of Alvin Kamara thus far. Marcus Yarns has shown some really nice things in pass protection as well, in particular, which is funny because he's kind of one of the smaller guys. He's not one of the guys you would expect there. The one player that I feel like maybe there's been the most questions about has been Cam Akers. Cam Akers has put the ball on the ground a few times. He hasn't really had any big moments and stuff like that. He's had some drops as well. I'm not saying Cam Akers is out of the conversation, but he feels like maybe while there's not anybody that's pulled away yet as the most successful non-Alvin Kamara running back, Cam Akers kind of feels like he's the one that's maybe most behind in the conversation. So we'll see if he'll be able to start closing that gap as he moves forward. There have been no changes in the offensive line. There was all that conversation about how, yeah, we'll rotate and all this stuff. It's been Kelvin Banks Jr. at left tackle, Trevor Penning at left guard, Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and Taliesin Fuanga at right tackle. And there have been no changes to that outside of once when Trevor Penning false started during a drill. So they took him out and they put Dylan Radins in for a play during that drive. That is something they have made a habit. Anytime there's been any false starts or operation, pre-snap penalties, things like that, they take that guy out. They put a new guy in, you lose that rep, and then you get back out on the field after that. Lastly, in terms of competitions, you want to see somebody else stand up at edge rusher that's behind Chase Young and Carl Granderson. For me, the player that has been most consistently standing out continues to be Chris Rumph. We need to see him turn that in away from flashes into consistency, all of that. But the flashes are becoming daily. And so to me, that's becoming consistency. So just something we want to continue to watch and another player to continue to keep an eye out on. All right, let me give you a couple of injury and transaction updates as well as we wrap up here. Juwan Johnson's okay, dealing with a groin injury, going to miss a couple of days, ain't no thing. Hamstring for JT Gray, week to week. It doesn't sound like it's long term. Trayton Welsh, the tight end, as well as John Ridgway, the defensive tackle, were not at practice on Thursday, but doesn't sound like there's anything serious there. Saints moved on from Hunter Decker, signed a third punter in Kai Kroger. Pretty interesting there, but we got to wait and see what that all means. All right, no Saints practice today, so no live show tonight, but we'll see you tomorrow here as we continue on with Saints training camp. We appreciate you very much as always, making us a party day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else or on your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Know what our family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.